Gentlemen, firstly, again, thank you for your time. The mics, thank you. I'm gonna take some liberties as I've got the floor. So, Dan, first question for you. I just want to look at the bigger picture, kind of the macro context that Eskom is operating in at the moment. So, I don't know what, if Project Vulindlela means anything to you, and I imagine it does. When I think of Vulindlela, I think of Brenda Fassie. So when I heard of Project Vulindlela, I was quite interested, but I lost interest quite quickly. But Project Vulindlela has been run out of the presidency, and it's Treasury and the presidency working on 5 key areas that they believe will move the country forward: energy, the visa system, logistics, ports and rails, all of that. And I think energy is number 1. So identified by the presidency as the key critical issue that South Africa needs to get right if we are to move ahead as a country. So I can understand your frustration with Siphihle's presentation not mentioning that. My question, just like Brenda Fassie, I mean, she was surprised that she was finally getting a daughter-in-law. We've been surprised that we've had 140 days of electricity. You've worked at Eskom before Project Vulindlela, and you're back there now. Just describe the impact of working under those 2 different environments that you've worked in, and how Project Vulindlela potentially has made your life easier, or how it's impacting.
Craig, if you look at my CV, you realize that I spend quite a lot of my professional time in SOC space. I spent a very little period after varsity in the private sector, and I went into SOC space. And then I left Eskom. I was in the private sector for about 8 years, primarily with 2 entities. When I went back into Eskom, of course, I was now tuned to dislike everything about PFMA and the delays that it brings in decision making. I was freed in the 8 years from misalignment of policies that are intended to mean well, but they're just implemented at different paces, rendering all of them ineffective. So the ability of the state to deliver in SA broadly, and we've always said this, is not reliant on good policies or plans necessarily. It's enabling execution pace. The misalignment of policies and procedures have frustrated us and frustrated the economy. This is what Project Vulindlela seeks to address, to ensure that ministries act coherently and act at the same pace, at the same rate, to enable attainment of results. I'll give you a anecdotal feedback coming out of the NICOM process. I spent time with the DG in the presidency, and a number of things were done to support Eskom in a very short space of time that otherwise would have taken 2 to 3 years, ordinarily. So when we are at NICOM and there's a problem, and we say it's got to do with environmental affairs, the following day, the decision makers at environmental affairs will be brought in. They're brought in to be aligned to the intention of the country, and they have to find ways within their rules to expedite that. That's what's given us, within the NICOM space, the ability to move fast. Now, having done that through a NICOM process, what do you do when you have reached the EAF of 70% and the lights are on? Do you go back to your old ways of working, or do you institutionalize the new way of working? So the DG said, we are actually busy recodifying the way the government should work. And that's what Vulindlela should deliver. We should not get back to the inconsistent application of the policies, the misalignment in timing, so we can have a functional state. So we should give Vulindlela space and support it. I think our next biggest issue to tackle as a country is in logistics. I speak to my counterpart at Transnet. We actually just had a ESCOM Transnet top-to-top dinner on Monday to exchange ideas and share lessons and watch outs. We think they'll get there. They just need an enabling space as well, like we did.
Yeah, that's very encouraging to hear. So hopefully what we see at ESCOM, we start to see on some of the other Vulindlela sort of focus areas. Dan, I'm going to stick with you for now. There was a question that came through from, I don't know if I should mention the person's name. There we go. ESCOM always employed more staff than what is needed. You spoke earlier about the 15,000 people that you were to need. And it's been in the news for many years that ESCOM kind of, for the number of staff they got and the amount of electricity it produced, compared to other countries, we seem to be a bit of an outlier. So the question from Carl is, has this been addressed? And if not, what is the plan? Does green finance really make that much of an impact where South Africa is an extremely small player in the world's economy? Yeah.
You know, the reason I was saying ish, that moment when you're sitting in exam and you remember that you didn't read chapter 11 of the book, you go like ish. You know it's in chapter 11 of the book and you didn't read it, you go like ish. That's Tulo, he's my general manager in the office. Tulo and I spent time with a research development and testing team last week, Thursday. An amazing outfit out in Rocheville. It's got 76 of its staff members of 120 or so have a master's or PhD degree. They have amazing research they're doing that supports the electricity sector. So we spend a day with them to go through what they're doing and to make sure I can align them to the strategy of where I want the business to go. Research for supporting operations today, but still keeping an eye on long-term innovation as we go around. And one of the guys that Dr. Ulrich, this is his name, I remember, is based in Cape Town. One of the guys that was presenting Dr. Ulrich happened to be the guy that actually wrote a paper in response to that so-called smart paper that talked about the overstaffing levels in ESCOM. So I asked Tulo this question 2 days before, that you need to address this issue. We're going back to the MYPD application for tariffs, and this issue of you're overstaffed and highly paid, incompetent individuals comes up. Tulo checked it out. He says, no, but there's a paper from the World Bank and there's a rebuttals of it. The rebuttals are not published because we don't own the media houses. There was a very comprehensive rebuttal done by Dr. Ulrich. That's why I'm going ish. Because 2 days after I'd met Dr. Ulrich, he sent me, I said to him, can you actually unpack that rebuttal paper for me in 4 slides? Just the key aspects of it. He sent it. And in my inbox, I still have it as unread. Ish. But I'll give you high level, because I have an idea of where it's gone to. You see, you have to look at your staffing levels in relation to the quality of your operations in as far as the state, the technology you're using. It is not correct to look absolutely at megawatts produced and say megawatts produced divided by 20 people, therefore here's a unit per person. What is the state of your asset? We haven't been doing maintenance here and spending money in doing proper maintenance for 5 years. What do you think is happening when, a year ago, when you went to those stations? Where do you think the ash at the power stations was lying? It's on the floor. Where should it be lying? On the conveyor belt to your ash dams. Who must move the ash? If your state of the power plant in Europe is functioning well, you will have a few people less than the ones that are cleaning up on the floor for the ash. So the quality of your power plant, from just in terms of how it looks, determines the number of people that you're going to be dealing with. So you can't look purely on megawatts produced divided by the number of people. Here's the benchmark. This is one area where the paper failed to recognize the peculiarity of our operations. But the biggest part, thanks to Tulo, who whispered in my ear, so even without reading the paper, I can get half a mark here, is that that paper did not take into account the expansive distribution network that Eskom owns in this country. Eskom owns the bulk of our distribution networks. In fact, distribution is our biggest business unit by number in terms of headcounts. The utilities, where they looked at this from a megawatt generation perspective, don't own the reticulation system. A bulk of our people sit there. So if you strip that out and do it on a like-for-like basis, you would have arrived at a different thing. And our Dr. Ulrich wrote a paper on that and responded to that article, but it never saw the light of day. I need to get that up to speed, because as we get into the conversations from 2 weeks' time, this issue will come up. You are overstaffed. You're overstaffed, that's why your costs are coming through. What did the VGB report that was well quoted say? You are understaffed. You've got less people, you've got no engineers in critical roles, lots of vacancies, you're lacking supervisors. That's why your operations are not as smooth as they need to be. So we'll address this issue quite comprehensively. We'll do it. Yeah.
Great, no, thank you for that, Dan. Sipe. Okay, so question from my side. I noticed on your slides you spoke about bonds, equity, but about cash. Like most fund managers in South Africa, you said nothing about listed property. And if you look over the last year, listed property is up 30%. Bonds, I think, up 18, 16%. Equity is up less than bonds. What's wrong with property? You guys just is it like the love child that nobody should know about? Or because asset managers tend to have a perennial underexposure to listed property. But just kind of given what you've heard from Eskom, obviously with the lights staying on, property guys are going to be spending less on diesel as well. What are some of your views? And I think we've had a couple of questions coming from the audience on listed property as well.
So they'll be spending much less on diesel, but they'll be spending quite a lot when the tariffs go up. And they've gone up by quite a bit more than inflation as well over time. So the tariffs and all those sort of other increases in costs have been hurting their margins for quite a while. And at the same time, your tenants have gotten stronger. And then so you're negotiating with them. I think before the contractual increases used to be like 6 or 7%, and then over time they went to 5. Some people are trying to bring it down below that, and they'll say, oh no, inflation's come down, but then inflation goes up, they still don't want to bring it up again. So it's one of those things where a lot of people say you must be careful where you've made money once to go back again, because you can be a bit clouded in your opinions of that. So property in South Africa did incredibly well before, I think it was 2018, and the main reason of that was They were doing a lot of funny things accounting-wise. So they were paying too much cash out. So they were paying way more cash than they were generating. And then at the same time, they were raising shares on very high multiples. So you know, a thing worth 100, they'll be able to get 150 for it, and then put it back into growing the business. Then they pay you out your 100, but then they ask you to give you back the 100 again. But you're gonna get less for it, and then it really helps you grow cheaply. Which at the time I think it was clever of them. I can understand why you do it, but then at the same time they would choose their earnings with weird offshore structures. So that helped them grow way above the fundamentals of the properties, and then that crashed, and now they're not rated quite highly anymore. So we're nervous because we think that the property businesses won't grow ahead of their fundamentals anymore, and their fundamentals are challenged by strong tenants who push back on negotiations. You have to grow the underlying rentals, and you have to grow the underlying footfall, you have to grow the revenues of the businesses. And at the same time, you have these rates that are increasing by way more than inflation. So it's a difficult space to be in. We have some stuff, but the main stuff we have is like offshore. NEPI is one business that's done incredibly well in Central and Eastern Europe. And then we did have, I see someone from that business is here. We had some Fortress, but that did well because of other restructuring stuff that happened, value unlock, but it's a difficult industry.
Okay, you're forgiven me for now. Question for Siphesihle. If we consider the elements that contributed to an SA failed state decline, other than energy and the government of national unity, do you have a view on the other elements that if they are resolved, we move away from failed state dark cloud and a more meaningful GDP growth?
Yeah, it's a tricky one, because I think, sure, we need to spend, and at the same time we need to cut spending. But we do need to spend, but we need to spend smartly on the right things that contribute to growth. So when you talk about things like Vulindlela, if those things are done well, then it makes sense, because those are sort of the easy points, right? Making things move faster, spending efficiently on the right things that generate growth rather than, spending on the wrong thing. So like when we talk to businesses, they underspend on CapEx versus what they would love to, mainly because of things like logistics, right? So if you have coal mines, and if all of a sudden Transnet could rail double the amount of coal, I can guarantee you the next day there's going to be not double, but there's going to be a huge amount of investment in that area on those sort of things. So we watch closely for that, and I think it's the things we talk about with the businesses we invested in. So logistics is a big one. Water is going to be a big one. People are starting to realize that as well. So it's a lot of issues, and we need to spend, but spending is difficult to do because spending is expensive, and because we're not highly rated globally, we're risky, so our debt's expensive. Then there's also clever things that we do, that we should do, and I think Treasury is doing that as well. So being clever about the way you finance, like this just energy transition stuff, I think it's clever because you get cheap financing, but then if you frame it right, so you have to frame it right on the social aspects rather than just thinking about the environmental stuff, because obviously we have a different context, then you can get like very cheap financing to spend on your stuff. So I think we must also, play our Africa card to Europe to get us some cheap financing as much as we can, and then use that to spend on growth. And then I think that would be useful. But it's a very difficult situation. Like some economists would say, we just need inflation to inflate out of debt, which is, I think, for humans, a very bad situation.
Dan, back to you. With the migration of the haves to solar, and some of the solar guys are here now, so just let your security guys know. Eskom is going to have a hard time recovering its fixed cost, or the remaining costs consumers, especially that South Africa is progressively becoming a welfare state, and the poor cannot afford your rate increases. So suggesting that those who have solar will use solar a lot more and those are the ones who can afford to pay for electricity. The ones who can't afford to pay for electricity will be the ones using Eskom. And they can't afford your rate increases. Don't take that personally. How do you mitigate for that?
Realize I didn't answer the second question that you posed related to the relevance of green financing in SA, given us being a small market. So we're using and wanting to tap into the JET funding to help repurpose and repowering. And this is beyond just electricity. It's about the repurposing aspect. It's got to do with rekindling economic activity so that we can have those communities functional going forward. But we have a massive program on building the infrastructure for transmission to enable us to hook up more of renewables, especially in the stranded areas of Northern Cape, Western Cape, and Southern Cape. As the infrastructure becomes available, we'll see a lot more demand for some of this funding. The extent to which those will be meaningful in relation to global standards, we still have to see. But I think there's a lot more that's going to come this space. Craig, I just wanted to tell you that all the PV and migrated customers, they're still my customers. You know why? None of them totally disconnect from me. I'm still their backup. I'm still their backup. None of them totally disconnect, because for that day when the sun is not shining or the wind is not blowing, they need to, of course, if they've got battery storage, they then are insulated for some time. And this brings into mind the whole issue of the tariff structure. Our current tariff structure was premised on the harmonization of costs across the cross-subsidization, the availability of capacity all the time. We've been arguing for quite some time that we need to revisit the tariff structure so that it can reflect the various components that are, and I saw yesterday or this morning an article that work is at full speed to do this, but we've been engaging with it. We are there. We're not sure if that work will be done in time for the current determination. The current 5-year determination will be on the same rules of the last 5 years, because that's a court order. NERSA has not moved fast enough to enable us to look at different things. You've got to have a lot of stakeholder participation and shaping that aspect. Do we think a lot of people, the haves, will move away significantly? As part of, and it is the majority, those who can afford to start living out their lives in a manner that reflects their belief systems, going greener, So those will move on. I think this country will have arrived when we can allow even those who are not rich to be able to live out their belief systems and make accessibility to solar, to others in a combination of portfolios possible for them. I had an interesting conversation with one of the big banks in the city. And they said, if you can find, what's Telkom's fiber group that's helped them move faster?
OpenServe.
If you can find the OpenServe magic in Eskom that allows you to roll out PVs in the same way, we will fund you. We will bring money to the table. We think only Eskom has got the capacity, the know-how to actually play in that space. Why are we not playing in that space as Eskom? Because we chose not to be in that space. Previously, we adopted a strategy that said, we must stay in the lanes that we are in and follow the coal strategy. My instruction to the distribution team is that no space is inaccessible for us. So when I talk about the 6 or the 8 product offerings that we'll give in the distribution business that is unbundled, just watch the space in terms of where we're going to go. The ESCOM of tomorrow will not look like the one of yesterday. There's nothing that precludes us from playing in the spaces that are about energy solutions going forward that are different from the ones that we come from. We'll build on our capability and scale. And that's the spaces that the distribution team is now busy with. Yeah. So we'll embrace the challenge and find a way in which we can turn that into a new way of working for us.
Fantastic. Good luck with that. I saw what OpenServe did in our road. No lights for 4 days. So you just brought some fresh trauma back there. Sipe, this is a very South African question. Well, in your view, what are the key drivers for the gold price, and why do we have gold at 2,500 rand for dollars an ounce at the moment? And what's the outlook?
Outlook is a bit of a tougher one, but I can kind of think about how we think about it longer term. So there's a few things. So the US fiscal situation is bad. Ours isn't great, but the US one is actually very bad as well. And if you just project the numbers and the entitlement that they have spending on, you have the army, you have pensions, you have all that stuff. The US fiscal situation is bad, and people worry about the dollar long term. You put that together with a situation like Russia, where you realize that people can freeze your reserves as a country, and then you thought you had all these reserves, and now they're gone the next day. A lot of countries in the global south, at least, are nervous about their reserves, and they're trying to move away from just being dollar-based. And a nice place to put your reserves is gold. So there's been a lot of central bank buying over the last year and a bit. And then there's also been a lot of individual buying. So in China, where people invest a lot in housing, they don't trust their equity markets because there's a lot of weird and shady businesses on their equity markets. They've also been buying a lot of gold as well. So when there's less trust in the world, there seems to be a move towards holding hard assets, which for a very long history have proven to be money-like in nature and hold their real value quite well. And then you put that together with the US interest rates coming down. People like that thing of the opportunity cost of holding gold. You're not getting an income. So when income rates come down, then people tend to be more willing to move towards gold. It's that opportunity cost argument. So if you look at the overall market cap of gold versus other financial instruments, then it could go up a lot still. But who knows? It is a tricky one. So it's good to have some in the portfolio because it does counterbalance other risks that could happen to other businesses. But you don't have, at the same time, we don't have too much. So it's a nice downside protector in a portfolio.
How much gold do you have in yours?
I think it's about 5 or 6 at the moment. So it's not a huge amount here.
Okay. Right. I think in the interest of time, we're going to have one more question, and there's one theme that has come up with several people in the audience, and that's for you, Dan. So I'll read the one question, but it actually touches about the same topic that 2 or 3 other people have asked. From an engineering perspective, nuclear energy is the best. Would Eskom consider putting in place another Koeberg, for example? Another question would, can you say more about the progress of the nuclear energy program? So, yeah.
I had a number of technologies on my slide when I spoke about clean technology. I didn't lift up the nuclear component of it, but it's there. You would have picked up in the last few days that the government has paused or withdrawn the determination on nuclear so that they can follow a less contested approach. The intention is to reinstate it. This country, from a policy perspective, still feels that the nuclear will play a key role for baseload, and I share that view. We are well plugged in terms of government nuclear ambitions. As a business, we are the only operator of nuclear on the continent. We've been doing this safely for 40 years. We've just managed to have a license to operate Quebec Nuclear Unit 1 for the next 20 years. Unit 2 is going through some modifications, and we expect its license for extension to come through early in the new year. We believe strongly in nuclear as ESCOM. It's not surprising. We've built capabilities, competencies there. You will recall that up until 2008, ESCOM had a subsidiary called Pebble Bed Modular Reactor. We were driving the development of local technology in terms of the next generation of nuclear reactors. And this, we had to cancel that program because the state ran out of money, essentially. They had to prioritize other social programs. So we as a business have continued to prepare 3 sites, in particular 2 sites, from an EIA perspective, in anticipation of us getting to a decision on building large-scale reactors, same size as Quebec, 2.4 gigawatts. And we've prepared the site in Jeffreys Bay and the site next door to Quebec in particular. But there's also an emerging technology in terms of reactor size that is also worth looking at, the small modular reactors. Many of the technologies are still going through pilot plants, pilot phase. We are watching that space very closely. One of the pilots that is now under construction in the US is actually based on our PBMR technology that has been taken over from us when we stopped and advanced to the next phase. And it will be built for Dow Chemicals. Should be operational in the next 4 years or so. These tend to come at capacities of about 80 to 100 megawatts, easy to deploy, and can be at multiple sites. We see great opportunity of this technology once proven. Of course, the Chinese have got one running commercially. We see great opportunities of this technology once it can be proven, and once it comes within the appropriate side of the cost curve for deployment, for repurposing at the coal stations as you mothball them, because the rest of the infrastructure more or less can come in. So we're still a serious nuclear player, and we'll stay close to that process as well.
Great. Ladies and gentlemen, in the interest of time, it's now 8:15. I think some of you might be hungry. You're not, we can carry on. Okay. Dan, CP, you guys are going to be around for a little bit longer. You're going to be going. Yeah, I think from my side, certainly feel a lot more confident, certainly when it comes to ESCOM, partly because I've got Solly in, and the irony is that I will not be able to use it now for a long time. No, but seriously, you just get a sense that ESCOM is in a much better place, that people are focusing on the right things, the maintenance, I can't remember who said it, but we don't need plans in South Africa, we just need to do the basics a lot better, and we're seeing that happening at ESCOM, and we're seeing the impact of that. And so hopefully we see that in logistics and rail, and we see that with the other elements of William Lilla. So Yeah, from an investment perspective, we are looking, certainly from a GMI perspective, increasing local exposure within our funds. We have increased our property exposure in the last couple of months, unlike Alan Gray, but now we have been increasing our property exposure, but off a fairly low base. But there are significant opportunities for return across the board: property, bonds, equities. So I think from our side, thank you very much for contributing tonight. I hope the audience has found it valuable. We just have a compliant thank you gift from our side. Compliant with yeah, no, we bought it on sale, so Sipe, thank you very much. I appreciate it. On behalf of the team of GM Investments, I'm just gonna. Oh.
You can't do all of this and not get anything. So
oh, is this for me?
Here's your token as well.
Oh, thank you. That was Victor from Alan Gray. No, this one's compliant. I've got this one in my collection. Ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of GM Investments, firstly, thank you for your time. Alan Gray, we would like to thank you for hosting us. Vic, Candace. Anybody else from Alan Gray that's here? Sipe? Alan Gray, thank you for hosting us this evening. To the GM staff, if you guys can stand so people can see who you are. Okay, there's at the back, the naughty corner. Okay. No, don't clap for them. They're working. It's just so if you have a problem, you know who to go to. Yeah. Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to have dinner served. Yeah. I don't know, it's warm. I told it was 2 pots. Oh, there's 2 pots. So the pots are outside. There's wine. Please stay around for a bit. Sipe will be here. Gradidge's here. I'm here. Thank you again, and we hope to see you at a GM function again shortly.
Sorry, Craig, you asked me if I'm staying or leaving, but that was before you spoke about dinner.
Oh.
So I'm going to stay a little bit.
Fantastic.